Well, it was a week of chaos on Capitol Hill, finally coming to a close as President Biden signed a short-term government spending bill that avoids a shutdown. It followed days of upheaval and squabbling among lawmakers, even within their own parties. The final funding plan totals just 118 pages. It is a far cry from the more than 1,500-page spending bill that lawmakers rejected earlier in the week. Still tonight, many questions remain, including over how much influence billionaire Elon Musk will have in government proceedings going forward. For that and more, we're welcoming in our political panel tonight. We have Josh Lafazan, former Democratic legislator in Nassau County, New York, and Republican strategist Timothy Allen Simon, former appointment secretary under California Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger. Gentlemen, welcome both of you. Josh, we will start with you tonight. Who are some of the clear winners and clear losers after all of these days of upheaval in Washington?
Sure, Natasha, thanks for having me. And what a couple of chaotic days that we just lived through. In terms of the government shutdown crisis, I think there are two clear winners and three clear losers. In terms of the winners, first is clearly Elon Musk. He showed the power to single-handedly kill the original bill that Johnson had negotiated, and he also showed that his threat to fund the primary challengers for any senator that bucks President Trump is being taken very seriously within the caucus. I also personally think that Leader Jeffries is a winner. He kept his caucus unified, and he delivered all 196 votes for Democrats. And as the House was thrown into chaos again, I think he's making it pretty clear as an antithesis to Johnson that he's keeping the caucus unified. But in terms of the losers, we have three. First is Donald Trump, who, of course, originally wanted the debt ceiling lifted through the midterms in 2027, but now he'll have to do this fight again in March. And he saw 38 Republicans vote against a bill he openly supported. Joe Biden clearly is the least powerful of the lame duck presidents in recent political history that we've lived through. He was nowhere here in the negotiations. And of course, Mike Johnson, who no longer will be speaker, in my opinion, in a couple of weeks, saw 34 Republicans vote no and saw him be humiliated by the CEO of Twitter. So a couple of losers, but a couple of clear winners.
Okay, I appreciate that. Timothy, I saw you nodding a couple of times there. Let's talk about President-elect Trump. I mean, one of his biggest demands was extending the debt limit. That was not included in the end. What does that say about Trump's influence over his fellow Republicans?
I think what it says is that he still hasn't overridden the Tea Party element as well as the Club for Growth and those who are really deficit hawks in making certain that our government accounting enables us not to explode the deficit. I think ultimately they will lose. They've only kicked the can down the road until March. And I would expect in March is when the knife fight will really, or the cage match will really occur regarding the budget and the debt ceiling, which President Trump has requested be eliminated. By the way, both sides of the aisle have criticized the debt ceiling. It oftentimes is an inhibitor to implementing certain critical programs for the American people through the federal government.
And Josh, let's talk more about Elon Musk as well. Democrats taunting, they're calling him President Musk, calling him a puppet master. What is clear about Musk's influence from where you stand now? And are these statements by Dems likely to get under Trump's skin?
The answer is maybe, right? I think in the world of Donald Trump, I have lost the ability to be surprised. And it's clearly an attempt to needle President Trump and to drive a wedge between the president and who Elon Musk has self-proclaimed the first buddy. That's what he's calling himself. He's basically eating all three meals at Mar-a-Lago. He's inseparable with the president. So will the Democrats be successful? I don't think so, but there's a possibility. What's far more important is Elon Musk's hold over the Republican caucus. Now, this is somebody who single-handedly killed the original bill that Johnson had negotiated with Democrats. This is somebody who used his 208 million followers on X to highlight individual representatives who needed to change their minds. And this is somebody now who was floated as the next House Speaker by not just Rand Paul and Mike Lee, but Marjorie Taylor Greene. Do I think the shareholders of Tesla will let Musk become the next Speaker of the House? No. But the fact that he's so influential, I think, is a harbinger of things to come in the next session.
Yeah, Timothy, what do you make of this first buddy? I mean, what's your take? Does it look good for Republicans or even Trump for a non-elected official like Musk to have power like this?
Well, I will disclose I represented Mr. Musk in past energy matters.
Thanks for watching. Go to joinnn.com to find News Nation on your screen. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.